Okay, go, say something.
Say something.
All right, no, we're good. I started it. All right, I'm here with Richie Hardcore.
Hello.
Hello.
It's nice to meet you in person.
In the flesh.
In the flesh. IRL.
Yeah. IRL, in real life. Yeah, we did a podcast, was it a year ago now?
At least a year. Yeah.
Damn.
I know,
All
time
right.
flies. It's mad.
We've come far. We're live in the flesh. We're in Auckland. We're in a studio. I've got my camera and my iPhone set up. And we're just going to see where we go for the next 45 minutes / hour.
45 to an hour. Your studio time's going to run out and I have to look after my baby son.
Or we just have to wait if someone knocks on the door.
Yeah.
It's like, we're finished and clap, done.
I like it.
Okay, well, why don't we get started and just for people who don't know you, just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, so what I do, I am a public speaker, like a keynote speaker, public speaker, educator, and I do consultancy work around the interconnected issues of family and domestic violence prevention, masculinity, pornography, mental health, some alcohol and drug stuff. And I also have a charitable trust and I work with young people who are outside of mainstream education. I work with men and women who are in the criminal justice system or in rehabilitation from alcohol and drug abuse, or all of that, because they often go hand in hand. And I'm also a Muay Thai, kickboxing and boxing coach. So I used to be a fighter. I fought for 20 years and been involved in martial arts for 31 years. And I use now, I guess, a lot of Thai boxing and training as a pathway to reach people who might not have conversations around what is healthy masculinity and where do we get ideas from about sex and consent. And I've been doing that for several years now as well, sort of trying to bring all my worlds together.
Yeah, it sounds like all those things sort of interlink. Like you can use the Muay Thai for the mental health stuff and the masculinity and... Yeah,
entirely. And I feel like for some people that's quite paradoxical or oxymoronic, but it's not.
No.
Yeah, so I've found myself in this quite interesting niche that's kind of developed out of my own personal interests, but all my own personal experiences. And then I've wrapped, I guess, academic and professional understandings around things. I've always had this real curiosity for the world, and a curiosity for myself has emerged over the last 10 or 15 years. You know, why do I act like this? Why have these cycles always turned up in my life? And why do I like these sort of people? And it's been interesting to explore that. And then I've learned that within my own story, there's a lot of, that's not a unique story. So how do I use my, my education and my professional settings to help other people who might be on the same journey?
Yeah, totally. I'm interested in what got you so interested in this? And maybe men's mental health specifically and helping people. Like, was there something about your own upbringing that you wanted to? Yeah.
So, I've talked about this a lot. My father struggles with depression and alcoholism, and that runs back through my whakapapa, through my genealogy. If we went back to the First World War, my great grandfather on that side of the family went to war and came back and left my great grandmother by herself to raise 3 sons, which is my grandfather. And then I have a grandmother on that side a great grandmother on that side of the family as well, who was in a mental institution. Think like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest era. I don't even know her name, but obviously that affected how my grandmother was raised, how my grandfather was raised, how my father was raised, how that landed in me, And growing up was difficult. And, this is through no one's fault. It's people don't know what they don't know, And regardless, I've kind of been trying to unpack that. And it's been kind of fascinating. And that ties into this cultural moment, I think, where we're starting to have these conversations. Yeah, I used to do sort of professional work around alcohol and drug harm reduction for Ministry of Health funded project over here for several years, and that all falls out of growing up with alcoholism, I suppose. There's that saying, the personal is political, and now I feel like I wish it wasn't. A lot of the time I feel like ideology and politics permeates everything now to the most innocuous things, and I don't know if that's good, but at the same time, a lot of our personal journeys do color our professional work. I think the important part of that is we actually have to learn to do our self-discovery and our healing work and put some of our wounds to rest so we do our work better. Because I feel a lot of people in the advocacy and activism space are still very damaged, and that they haven't healed themselves or been on that journey of healing, and it colors their lens of the world, and it gets in the way of actually doing the work justice. So they're good at raising awareness, sometimes to millions of people, and starting conversations, but it risks, I think, not being pragmatic and crossing bridges and building unity and actually helping shift the dial on beliefs, values, actions, and behaviors that do cause real, tangible harm. It's good to have a loud voice, but who's listening to you? Does that make sense?
I worry about some of the people in those sort of social justice advocacy spaces can sometimes come across like they're doing it to bolster themselves.
Oh, entirely.
As opposed to help the cause.
I definitely was one of those people. If I look back,
explain that to me.
Well, I think I got into talking about things on the internet in my teens, like late 90s, and then early 20s. Message boards were a thing
before Facebook.
Before Facebook, yeah, before Facebook.
Yeah.
I'm older. That I guess I'm 44. And for some people, that's like, I'm done. We don't listen to middle-aged people, which is a shame because actually there's so much to learn from. I have mentors who are in their 60s.
Well, you've been on the planet longer. Like, dude, it's not like an ageist thing. It's just
but there is a real ageism, I think, in progressive spaces. Like we write anyone off who's of a certain demographic, and that's a real shame because I'm the best version of myself now. And in my 20s, I was very painful on the internet, dictating to people what was the right thing to think, and you're a bad person if you vote this way, and if you're not vegetarian or vegan, and why aren't you sober, straight edge, and all this shit. And it made me popular within like circles of people who already agreed with me, but everyone else who might have been open to conversation was like, that's pretty intense, like. What a dick.
It's really interesting because it comes from a kind of good place. I mean, I can see the appeal to these movements. Like, it is good to be, I'm not a vegan. What are some examples, like vegan or feminist?
No, I think they're they're well-intentioned.
But then it gets to a point where it's, you just become, I see some people becoming really ugly.
Yeah, entirely. It's like their justice and their anger for that justice warps them. It's like Star Wars, It's like, they've let the dark side take over, and they're no longer a Jedi. They're a Sith Lord, and they've become like warped by that.
But
desire but they let their anger that's driven their activism make them bitter and twisted them. And I definitely have been in that space, but certain events in my life made me change tact, and I'm so grateful for that.
Well, that's what I'm interested in because, it's interesting to, like, point at other people, but, like, noticing it within yourself is the most liberating thing. So when you were this, like, self-righteous social justice activist, when did you start to change?
Yeah, I think when I first time was on the receiving end of that, like 2015, 16, Western society went through this real global shift, I think. And if we
Explain that. What do you mean?
Well, if you think like the Donald Trump era really galvanized things between progressive and reactionary spaces, in that critical social justice or identity synthesis politics really jumped into the forefront of our public consciousness and our public conversations. These academic concepts about society academic philosophies about society, about power that were, brewing away in the background suddenly leapt into the public sphere through social media. X, formerly Twitter, became this whole, this whole napalm across journalism and activism, and then into the broader culture. We started seeing like cancellations, and the discourse seeped out of siloed off spaces into the mainstream. And I think Donald Trump's era brought that to light, because he did say really terrible things, grab him by the pussy, build a wall. Like, those are things I think most reasonable-minded people should be affronted by. And within that era, it was the first time I got like piled on by people who I thought were on the same team as me.
What in what sense?
I'd made this passing comment about Kim Kardashian's nude selfie as someone who works with young people and sees very tangibly the online bullying that goes on when a young person's nude gets leaked or shared intentionally, or revenge pornography is used to hurt someone who you're in an intimate sexual relationship with. Seeing those stories or hearing those stories or talking with young people in high schools, which is a lot of my work, what that does. Some dude made a long form post about how it's bad role modeling for young women, and I wrote, "Yeah, we need to teach healthier ways of validation." End quote. That was, and then it became this news article by some some very social justice warriors person with a very a very modern social justice publication, and it became a big thing, and I got piled on, and it really was confounding, and I didn't know what to do, and I said the wrong thing, and I tried to over-explain myself, and it was very like bewildering, because I'd not been through anything like that before, and it was at the emergence of, I think, what we now call like cancel culture and call out culture. And I think actually people have are coming towards the end of that. People I think people coming, people are like, oh, you got cancelled? Like, me too, like.
Yeah.
People are tired of it now.
Yeah, I mean, you can even wear that as like, oh, look at me, I'm cancelled, to sort of.
Yeah, you can get some clout from it, you know what I mean?
I see people doing that. Man, that must be.
So, but at the time, it was a lot, and it became like a national newspaper story, like my experience on the internet, and then, like in like the mainstream paper, like a very well-known journalist got in touch and came around and did an interview with me, and I cried in the interview, and it was like very earnest and like weird, but an honest reflection of how I think, I suppose. I was confused and didn't understand why I couldn't talk about things based on my identity, and it started making me think a lot about what we now know to be kind of identity politics. And because I'd come from this kind of class-based analysis, when I went and did my undergrad, it was in like political science, and I'd been traveling in Latin America, and I did a degree in, not Latin American, Spanish, but looked at like Latin American social issues. And
what's a class-based analysis?
Well, social class, like working class, middle class, upper class, who has money and why, what are the economic policies that are in place to redistribute wealth or accumulate wealth at the top, and why are so many working class people struggling, and why is there such a pooling of wealth and power with such a small percentage of human beings? Like,
yeah, and now it's shifted to identity.
Yeah, totally, and that's where a lot of my frustration lies, because a lot of the people who drive the identity politics discourse are really, can I swear on your podcast?
Yeah, do it.
Are really fucking rich.
Yeah.
I'm like, you're fucking rich. You've never had the police at your house.
Yeah.
You've never visited your mum and dad in rehab.
You don't live in those neighborhoods.
Yeah, totally. But I grew up like that. Like, the police would come and take my father away.
But you're white, so
Well, technically
yeah.
speaking, I'm actually of mixed race. I
Oh
just
God,
don't lean into it.
cut.
No, it's good. It's true. But like it is.
Say to you,
Well, you've got white privilege. And I'm like, yeah, but my white privilege didn't protect me from family violence, mental illness through my family history in the way that you have a six-figure salary and you're at you're a professor at a university and you're really successful by all metrics. And the academic constructs around power and privilege and intersectionality, I understand, but it's very simplistic in a way that voices like Thomas Chatterton Williams or Aisha Akambi or Coleman Hughes talk about, like our the superficiality of our skin color and our sexualities have become like the primacy of all political activism now, and yet it's very unnuanced and it's very simplistic, and particularly how these ideas, which are very complex, have leaked out of academia into social media and they're really bastardized now. I don't think they do us any favors. They allow certain people to have a narrow fulcrum of analysis and build a social media following and, get a newspaper column and shit like that.
Yeah, I know.
But I work every week with murderers and people who've been fucking assaulted people or methamphetamine addiction or methamphetamine manufacturing for supply. Like I work with people in the margins in person every day, and they don't really give a fuck about how I look or my sexuality or what my pronouns are. They care about me as a human being, and I care about them as human beings.
And how you treat them.
And how I treat them, and how we relate on our commonalities rather than accentuating our differences. And I feel like in the online activist space and academic and even now journalistic activism, we put all these barriers up between our shared humanity and working with real people who have different lived experiences in some regards and different identities in some regards. None of that matters. I can bear that in mind, but at the same time, I'm never going to go into a room full of men who've got criminal histories and histories of trauma and addiction and childhood sexual abuse and speak like that. Like they would look at me like I was an alien. And what works is seeing each other as human beings and looking at our universal experiences and feeling each other in that I know what it's like to be a really scared, insecure little boy. And I know what it's like to want to kill myself, and I know what it's like to lose people to suicide, and I know what it's like to see violence. I know what it's like to use violence as a man who grew up fighting other men. I've seen people get bottled and stabbed, and part of the reason I suppose I went through university and moved into like a middle class life is to move away from that. And I get super annoyed at these very insular, economically protected, affluent people trying to tell everyone else how to live. I can feel it talking to you. Like I feel so angry at how those people dictate the terms and conditions of the conversations that we're having about how to make the world better. And I understand why a lot of just general people have a reactionary bent when approached in that manner, because shame and judgment and cancel culture, all that shit doesn't work to move the discourse. Like,
no,
most people don't care about any of that stuff. And when they see the latest headline about the person who made a bad joke 5 years ago or a year ago, they kind of roll their eyes now. Or they're like, good on them, or I would have said that. instead of leading with curiosity and compassion and why does this person think this thing or why did this person do that, and I think it might be shifting as people tire of it, but there's still a lot of like outrage culture, right?
Yeah, definitely. I kind of wonder, like, you know, back to the identity politics is such a narrow way to look at people, but if it is, how has it permeated our culture so much? Like,
there's that. Have you heard of that notion of like institutional capture?
No.
Are you serious?
Well, maybe.
I thought you'd be all over it.
Institutional capture. I might know like a different word.
Well, if you think that, the ideas that we're talking about now,
audience capture. I've heard that word.
Well, institutional capture is all these people in elite spaces think politics, think journalism, think other forms of media, often go to university or are exposed to the concepts that come out of universities. They're filled with graduates from those, you know, the humanities department and the media department teach a particular ideology, and those people graduate and go on to fill, you know, the jobs that from which further disseminate these ideas through culture, right? Mm. So say you studied, I don't know, like journalism, and there is like a journalism and ethics paper that has a very identity synthesis heavy lecturer, then you go out into your job and you talk about everything through that lens.
Okay, so it's come out of these like universities, right?
Yeah, it's this notion that graduates from humanities departments, media departments, political departments leave university with a particular ideological worldview and then go on to populate the institutions in our society that share and disseminate ideas and knowledge and policy and legislation. You know, councils, parliaments, leaders of business, media, you know, social media. People have this then kind of like stranglehold on the dissemination of knowledge, and it permeates society. You know, some more conservative, reactionary voices might argue that it's the long march through the institutions.
What does that mean?
Well, I think, dear viewer, just take this with a grain of salt. But the idea that we need like a cultural revolution that falls out of Marxism, you know, we need to create like a dictatorship of the proletariat and overthrow the oligarchs and, you know, put people to the wall. If you think about the Cuban Revolution, you know, as much as I romanticize Che Guevara.
Or the Khmer Rouge.
Khmer Rouge, yeah. Khmer Rouge is a good one, yeah.
The Killing Fields.
The Killing Fields, yeah. So that's
let's make it equal. We're all equal, yet we're ordering you around.
Yeah, no, the Killing Fields is a great example, actually. Yeah. Like murdering all the intellectuals. That's part of a cultural revolution, right?
But that's extreme to say that's gonna happen now, right?
Yeah. Well, the argument now is that instead of like a military at the point of the gun societal revolution, we've actually done it from the inside out. So we've enacted new laws and legislations and cultural understandings, and we're changing the definition of words to recreate culture or society in what some people would argue is a more equitable, equal way. And I don't think that's I think that's a great goal. But there are lots of things with the approach or the ideology that personally I'm starting to see as counterproductive, ineffective, or just plain wrong. And so, yeah, I'm on this journey of trying to learn and unlearn and figure out what do I believe about politics and culture and ideology, and how do we best do that? And also understand that when I was young and coming to political consciousness and getting educated formally, there was a lot of like personal trauma that underpinned all of that and overlapped that, and a lot of who I thought I was and my identity was wrapped up in my values and beliefs. And with that, I think there's a real risk that when people attack your ideas, your values and beliefs, you feel attacked, like your core sense of being feels attacked, and it really hurts. And so you asked me, like, when did all my thinking start to shift, or when did I start exploring ideas? It was with that moment, right? Like those painful moments of being publicly attacked and shamed and humiliated and accused of thinking the wrong thing, ergo, you're a bad person, not worthy of respect or engagement, not worthy of engaging in a discerning conversation, that I had to painfully disconnect ideas and the exploration of them and adoption of them with who I am. And so I've been on this kind of quite interesting journey objectively, although if you knew me personally, you knew that it was really painful and I had real bad mental health and felt quite depressed and suicidal at times due to some of those experiences with online attacks.
It's difficult online because people don't see what it does to you. Like,
people don't see what it does to you.
Humanity is kind of lost.
Yeah. I went through this really horrible attack. This isn't all the time, dear viewer. This has happened like 3 times at like junctures in my life as an adult. And what I've learned is that is not unique. That is a very common thing for people who have been in politicized spaces or heavy social media users. And I always remember this one guy, a journalist, don't even know him really well, but we were acquainted and people were really weighing into me on line once, and he texted me and he said, I wanted to check if you're okay because my friend killed himself not that long ago off something like this, and I really just want to check in with you. And I see that guy around and I'm always real grateful. I'm like, can I buy you a beer? I didn't really know him. And he just saw the humanity in me and saw the disconnect and how massively misrepresented I was being at that moment in time to me, which is what happens online. Is just like people build this like avatar of you that's completely divorced from the complexity of any human being. Like the person that annoys you most on the internet probably still has things in real life that you would bond over if you were to meet them in person, right? But we never see that. Like the social media, by design, inflames us to look at things in a very two-dimensional way, rather than the multi-dimensional reality that we all exist in. And yet people are losing friendships and their mental well-being and their jobs and even killing themselves based on these experiences. And so for me, it was this really first organic and then intentional separation of my professional life, what I think, the ideas I'm exploring, and who I am and what really matters. And I used to hang out. If you went through my personal Facebook page, there's photos of me of lots of politicians in New Zealand doing advocacy work, and here I am in this campaign, and here's this old video of me advocating for this.
Was it the Greens?
Yeah, the Greens. I was on TV, like national television for like gay marriage campaign, and I'm on television for like decriminalizing cannabis and domestic violence prevention, and all very like progressive causes. Vote Green. Here I am with like James Shaw and Marama Davidson and Jacinda Ardern and all this sort of stuff, right? And yet the minute I step out of line from people in that space, horrible vitriol, horrible, people emailing people you work with or you might be acquainted with, all this sort of stuff based on rumors, lies, misinterpretation. And so I've been on this whole journey of like, how often does this happen? And it happens all the time. Like Monica Lewinsky did a Netflix series about it. There's the journalist like John Ronson wrote the book, So You've Been Publicly Shamed. And increasingly books are coming out about this. Greg Lukianoff and Ricky Schultz just put out the Cancelling of the American Mind. Frederick de Boer, who's a self-declared, Marxist, very hard leftist, put out How Elites Ate the Social Justice Movement. Catherine Brodsky just put out a new book on cancel culture. So what for a long time people in those spaces said wasn't a thing, like no one's ever really cancelled. People denied that. There is actually now a growing body of academic research around it and then journalistic work around it. And I'm really happy about that. You know, I spoke with Dr. Anne-Marie once, who won an award from, I think, the American Psychological Association because she wrote her dissertation on media trauma. And she keeps a tally of people who committed suicide off cancellations. You know, like people who deny that it's a real thing point to, say, Dave Chappelle or J.K. Rowling because they're too big to cancel. And they're like, well, they're still in the public space. They're still billionaires. But all the people who kill themselves or lose their little job aren't. And you don't ever see them in the public space again.
And people often say, oh, it's not cancel culture, it's consequence culture. But it's like, well the consequence is like huge. They don't realize.
Well, it's hugely disproportionate. And it's also presumptive of guilt with no evidence. Someone says something about someone with zero evidence, everyone believes the claim. And then when the truth might come out some weeks later,
the damage is already done.
The damage is already done. Cancelled people are still cancelled. It's like when the media does a headline and that's on the front page, but then the retraction, the apologies on like page 7. And that happens to people's lives. Like the money that they make to feed their children gets taken away sometimes. And that happens in Australia and New Zealand and the United States and the United Kingdom. And it's always progressive spaces where that happens. If like progressive forces rallied to attack some reactionary micro-influencer, they're going to be grateful for that because that attention's good, you know?
Yeah.
They don't give a fuck. It's when your tribe turns against you and stabs you in the back that there's all these like bodies. And then everyone's like walking on eggshells to think the right thing, to be seen to say the right thing. And no one gets caught up in actually like doing the work. And that's what I found myself the other day. You know, I was working with these men from prison and we're having this big conversation about mental health, and like dudes were telling me about their daughters committing suicide and how they were 4 months meths free and all this stuff. And I didn't have my phone out recording any of that. Like, who cares if I put that on the internet or not? Like, there is some advantageous, I guess, from awareness raising, education raising, inspiration. From a professional point of view, it's advertising, I guess. I didn't do this and facilitate these workshops. But that's not the work, right? Like, the work's actually like being with people and holding space for them. And if you're fortunate enough to have professional and academic and experience and knowledge and expertise to share that. And that's what none of these fucking idiots on the internet do. They just talk shit and throw judgment at people that they've never met without ever getting down. It's like that Roosevelt speech, right? Like the man in the arena. You know, like that's what it is, man. Like, and it's not just like social justice spaces. Try talking to a UFC star. You know, it's like I know like globally famous UFC stars who are like elite athletes whose bodies and minds are capable of doing things that most people aren't. And they put themselves out there and put their lives literally on the line. And some sack of shit bag of potato chips is on the couch like, oh, fuck, I could have done that. Why didn't you do this? Blah, blah, blah. And then go on social media and troll them. And it's like, dude, seriously?
Man, this is insane. I want to like talk about like, you're in these spaces and you're experiencing sort of all this polarization and people not doing the work. How do you push back against that?
I used to spend a lot of time trying to do that, like just posting about this sort of shit, but it came from personal wounding. So now I'm like, you know, I think these things are social problems because they get in the way of doing the work. Like I want there to be no homophobia. I don't want some gender non-conforming kid to get beat up. I don't want people who are different than me to be treated differently on account of their difference, right? I want people who grow up in violent, drug-addicted households to access the services and have the long-term supports they need to thrive and not end up in jail or killing themselves when they're 43. I don't want little boys growing up to be acculturated to sexually harass little girls or sexually assault them, right? Like, and I do work most days to try and shift the dial a little bit on all that sort of stuff. So I'm not outside of wanting the world to be different and having an idealism around it. And I see all this online shit, which translates to offline shit. You know, people do get deplatformed and lose their jobs or get shamed or socially excluded. It gets in the way of doing that work. Because often the person who's getting attacked or bullied or whatever is trying their best to do something good. And then they lose their over some like nuance.
So is it pushback? Do you ignore it, or do you just focus on elevating the good values?
These days I just try and elevate the good values. Like if something I think is clearly bullshit, but you know, I'll be like, that's bullshit. But I talked to a friend of mine who's like a multi-millionaire sports star, and I wanted some advice. I'm like, when do you, because people say mad things about them. I was like, when do you engage and when do you not engage? He's like, bro, if it's costing me money, I engage. If I don't engage.
That's a good...
And but again, like they have too big to cancel, right? But someone like me who is not, or you...
I'm like up and coming and I'm afraid.
Well, that's it. Like why am
I afraid? Why? Like,
yeah, because you've seen all the stuff I'm talking about, right? It's like when, sorry to keep going on about like Star Wars, but I'm a real nerd under all these tattoos. Yeah. But it's when they're going to blow up the Death Star and all the X-Wings and A-Wings are getting blown up and then it's just like Luke Skywalker, that's you, you know? You're like flying along and the TIE fighters are coming out trying to get you. And it's like, fuck, I got to keep going. Pull up, Luke. It's like, it is scary, right? And that's this thing, like, I got into like, I guess, progressive politics through punk rock and hardcore.
Yeah.
And
Richie Hardcore.
Yeah. And we were a counterculture. You know, in the 90s and early 2000s, you'd pull up to a show, there'd be merch stands and about like, you know, fuck racism and this is what class is and mental health and fanzines and like, it was very organic and DIY. But it wasn't people's necessarily core identities the way that it is now, and social media hadn't like perverted it at all. And the ideologies that I'm talking about now hadn't like seeped into everyone's consciousness and distorted things. And there was like a togetherness, I think, in all of that. And now there are these like pogroms and witch hunts to find the person who doesn't think the right thing or did the thing or was shitty some time ago or had a shitty relationship and that's been recast as this to fit this current narrative, right? But don't get me wrong, some people who've like actually been violently abusive or historically raped someone, fuck yeah, put them in jail. Fucking stay in jail, Harvey Weinstein, you piece of shit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or Bill Cosby or any of these motherfucking assholes, you know? But like the boyfriend who cheated on his girlfriend or the girlfriend who cheated on their boyfriend like 4 years ago,
yeah,
that's a different thing, you know? The guy who was promiscuous, but everyone knew where they stood and he never called back the people he was promiscuous with might have been a bit emotionally insensitive and hurtful, but that's not abusive.
It's a different level.
Well, it's not even on the same level.
You're right.
Yeah. Everything gets recast by these new understandings and social media distortion of things, and it actually gets in the way of the work, talking about consent, healthy, respectful relationships, what is abuse and what isn't. You know, how do you have a healthy relationship? You know, a lot of people grow up acculturated by a really shitty society in, you know, dysfunctional family systems. You need to work with those people to help them understand things. But if guys think that, I don't know, benign act A, B, or C is on the spectrum of abuse, that limits us having these conversations, you know?
Yeah. What would you say to anyone that's like navigating, or even just yourself navigating these social justice spaces and how to sort of deal with like the militant activists and, you know, because I still want to pursue truth and I want to have the hard conversations. But like I said before, like I'm scared. I feel like I'm walking on eggshells. I'm worried about saying the wrong thing. Like how do you sort of navigate these spaces? And how can someone else maybe?
There's actually a book on living with someone who has a condition called borderline personality disorder called Walking on Eggshells.
Ooh.
And borderline personality disorder is characterized by people who think their feelings are facts And
Yeah.
often, and I think that really permeates a lot of the spaces that we're discussing today. People mistake their emotional response to something as a fact when it's not. So I think we need to keep in mind what's real and what's not. I think it's important that we pick our battles. We don't need to weigh in on everything. We need to limit our energetic expenditure. We need to choose what's really important and what's not. We need to, be mindful of who you're talking to and what are their motives, and have good faith in your argumentation, but be aware that not everyone else does. I think sending voice notes is a fairly good idea when you're discussing something with someone that you're not entirely sure of their motives, so they don't screenshot it and then put it all over the internet. I think it's important to, if you have a really visceral, physical, somatic, emotional response to something, don't rush to the internet to spew those feelings up, because you'll say something that you regret, or you'll look back on sheepishly, and maybe you'll damage your reputation or someone else's reputation unjustly.
Yeah, totally.
You need to learn to check yourself. When I'm working with men who are violent offenders, it's all about emotional control and emotional regulation. You can't just explode, right? Because you'll hurt someone physically and emotionally. But I think people do that online all the time because of the online disinhibition effect. Like you said, Melody, people don't see the impact of the words that you type, or the meme that you make, or the like that you put, or the laughing emoji at a really cruel joke, at someone else's expense. And the thing that I've always observed is that as someone who spent my life doing kind of social justice-y type bullshit in a tangible way, I've very rarely been attacked by conservatives. Like in a small country like New Zealand.
What is that?
In a small country like New Zealand, where I've been on television for like drug decriminalization, gay marriage, like all this sort of stuff. I used to do radio for 15 years, interviewed like all manner of, NGOs, blah, 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 homelessness, this, how do we help, people with substance abuse disorders? Why are there not enough beds in rehab? Like all like shit like that. It's not conservatives who've gone under their way to attack me.
No.
I don't get my DMs ever filled with people like that. And yet it doesn't happen all the time. And most of the stuff I get online is really cool. And I'm really thrilled to be online again, because for a while I was kind of hating it. I was kind of like over it, and it was such a negative space. But a lot of it's really like positive and kind and intelligent. But there have been moments that I've alluded to where you're just getting blown up by some maniac saying terrible things that aren't true, or name calling you, or wishing you death.
Yeah.
And sending you death threats and violent threats. And were they to do that in person, it just like boggles belief, because they don't.
This is like slightly different, but and I'll just like wrap up pretty quick. But I always wonder, like, how do I respond with compassion to, because I've been putting some gay Christian shit out there, and people just send me Bible verses like Romans 1. Yeah, they gave themselves over to their flesh. Woman shared unnatural desires with other women, or a man shall not lie with a man. I'm just like, I started saying, look, love you, God bless, but that's just another form of snubbery. I feel, but it's probably better than fuck you, motherfucker.
Yeah, it is. It is better than fuck you, motherfucker, because you're not going to change how they think by saying fuck you, motherfucker, right? Like, what's the desired outcome?
But I'm just going to piss them off more by being like, oh, love you, God bless.
Well, say nothing.
Yeah, well, but then you got to engage for the algos.
Oh, well, that's it. Just put an emoji up. Yeah.
All good, bro.
The emoji's an algo.
I'm a work in progress with that. But,
oh, we all are, I used to spend so much time like writing these diatribes in the comments. The world is not going to be changed in the comment section.
Yeah. Oh, well, why don't we just wrap up with sort of what's next for you? What are you going to...
Yeah, so I do a workshop series in collaboration with the Ministry of Social Development, and then I have some other funding from another government agency. So we use martial arts. So I've got like a UFC star called Dan Hooker. He's teaching a guy called Jason Suddy. And then they're teaching Muay Thai and kickboxing and MMA. And then I'm talking about healthy masculinity, stopping domestic violence. And I got another bro talking about mental health. So I have a series of those around the country. which is cool. Yeah, I really love working with communities. I've got my charitable trust. I'm in the process of looking hard for a physical premises to run, you know, Muay Thai, kickboxing, boxing stuff out of, but also run workshops, seminars, instead of having to travel all over the place.
Yeah.
Like, I want people to come to us. So just trying to find an affordable space is kind of a headache in Auckland. That's not too far from the city.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got asked to write a book, so I'm in kind of...
No way.
Yeah, I haven't signed the contract yet, but I should.
That'll be cool.
Yeah, my writing's not the greatest, if I'm honest. It's not bad sometimes, but it can be very academic, and I'd like to... Or pseudo-academic, even worse. So I'd like to learn how to... If I can write how I speak, I think would be good, you know?
Totally.
And so, yeah, I'm working on that in the background, and just being a father and a husband and... you know, hanging out with my boys and putting time into what matters, which is not always the stuff that we're discussing today. You know, that used to be quite like a holistic thing for me, and I get so caught up. But actually what matters is the real people in your life, your family, your children, your friends, you know, your immediate community, all the other stuff, you know, that's out there. Don't make it in here.
Yeah. Yeah, totally, man. Oh, well, that's been really cool.
Lovely to meet
chat
you,
with
Poppy.
you.
I've
Yeah,
really
in the
enjoyed talking
flesh.
with you. I think you're a cool human being, and I hope that we continue to like be in connection.
Yes. Well, I'll come back when you release your book.
Yeah, for real.
All right, thanks, man.
No worries.